Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm Karrie Lynn if you're new here, and today I'm going to be sharing with you a kitchen island DIY start to finish. Many of you have already got to see this project unfold over the course of a few videos, so I'm sorry if this is a little repetitive for you guys, but the reason I wanted to do this and combine it all into one video is so that way I could refer everyone back to this one spot to answer all of the most asked questions, because I felt like since I filmed it over the course of like 3 vlogs, it was really hard to figure out which vlog I shared what in my brain. I couldn't remember. So I hope you guys don't mind, but hopefully this video is helpful and enjoyable to watch so you can see how I transformed our kitchen island from this to this. Today's video is also sponsored by Factor. A huge thank you to them for sponsoring today's video, and I will share a little bit more about Factor later on in the video. To start off this video, I did want to share once again that this is a recap from a project I've already done. So feel free to use the timestamps down below to kind of jump around where needed. So I will be walking through each step individually to share with you how I completed our kitchen island start to finish. The first thing I did for this kitchen island was try to demo the wood where we had messed up. So as you can see here from this video clip, the wood was a little lumpy and bumpy. We just didn't really have the best craftsmanship when we built the kitchen island originally, and that's okay. It's all part of, the learning process, and I do feel like over time with projects you do get better and better, and this is just one of those where we had improved over time and it was time to fix it up. So first thing I tried to do was rip off all this old existing wood, but although we were not that great at building at the time, we definitely were good at making things last. It was glued and nailed to no end, and I could not for the life of me get this wood off of this kitchen island. So I ended up having to just cover it up, and luckily I happened to go to Lowe's and I found these wainscoting panel boards. These are like about 20 bucks for these, and they already have a really pretty design on them and they're smooth. So I thought it was perfect for this project, especially since it was kind of small. I didn't want to have to buy any large pieces of panels and cut them down. So this actually worked out perfect. And because these were so affordable, I feel like it saved me a lot of money with this project. Instead of going out and buying 2 large panels, cutting them down, buying separate trim to trim it all out, utilizing these definitely kept me under budget. So I really love that, how affordable they are. Here I'm just taking my measuring tape now and marking on each side where I need to make my cuts. I marked it with a pencil, and then I take it outside. I utilize some clamps and a scrap piece of wood that I had to give me a nice straight line, and I used my Craftsman skill saw to just cut these on each side. To attach the panel board, I used my Craftsman 20 gauge brad nailer, and I just popped a few nails up into the corners of each side. Later on I go in and I pop in a few more nails, but I really just wanted to get it in place and held up so that way I could start planning out the rest of the project. Once I got the 2 panels on each side, it was now time to work on the inside of the kitchen island, so like the little cubby part where the chairs go. So this part was never finished whenever we originally built the island. I had every intention on finishing it, and it was just one of those projects that we kept putting off, and years went by. And now I'm finally trying to just perfect all my work and go back through and fix things up, because that's just part of being a DIYer. I feel like I jump from project to project, and there's some that I never finish. So this was very much needed. So I took some more trim boards that I got from Lowe's, and I cut all these down to fit, and I'm going to show you guys how I kind of placed everything on the kitchen island. So here I'm kind of just piecing together all of the boards that I've cut at this point. I got a 1x6 that's going to go right here on the edge. I have some beadboard that I'm going to finish off on the inside, and now it's just a matter of nailing everything up. So this part does take a little bit of patience and time, so give yourself some grace if you are working on a project like this. It's okay if you have a few gaps or cracks. Don't stress it too much, because whenever everything is all done and nailed in place, you are going to go in with caulk and you're going to caulk all your seams, and usually that just finishes everything off. So you will notice here at the bottom, I was struggling with getting a perfect seam. I just finally just gave up on it, and I was like, you know what, it's fine, I'll just fill it. But everything else turned out really good. It was just this one little piece at the bottom there that I just couldn't get perfect. But I did know that once I filled it, painted, it was not even going to be that noticeable. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to leave it and move on, because I could have spent all day trying to get that seam lined up. And I just, at some point, I knew it was never going to work. So I was like, you know what, just nail it in and call it a day. At this point, it was just a matter of all the finishing touches. I added this corner trim right here to the side. This is going to cover that seam from the panel boards in the original kitchen island. So I just popped this in, once again, using my 20 gauge Craftsman nail gun. And then when everything is finished, I do go in with caulk and fill all the seams, so that way it's just a super seamless finish. Now that the kitchen island has been finished as far as the trimming out and just redoing the entire sides and the inside of it, it's now time to get started on painting. I did take off the cabinet doors, and I took off all the hardware except off of that one cabinet door, and you can see it got stuck. Because the screw got stripped out, I ended up having to break it off, which is no big deal, but anyway, that happens sometimes. I did take my sander and sanded down the drawer fronts and also the cabinet doors, because they had been layered and layered with different colors of paint, because I could never make up my mind what color I wanted. So I went ahead and sanded those down so that way the new paint would adhere really well and have a super professional finish. The color I'm using is called Shade Grown by Sherwin Williams, and I had it mixed into a Valspar Reserve paint. So this is just a really durable paint that you can use, and I feel like it really is super durable, and it gave a beautiful finish, so definitely recommend. And like I said earlier in the video, everything that I used, I will have in the description box down below, and I'll just kind of have like a material list for everything that you'll need for a project like this. Paint, like tools, whatever it is that you'll need. I'll link what I can. Whatever I can't link, I'll just list. But yeah, love this paint color. It's a very moody dark green, and I love that. I'm definitely going into, I don't know, moodier colors recently. I love a dark vibe. So this paint color was just perfect for the space. I first took my paintbrush and trimmed everything out. This is essential if you are painting cabinetry. If you don't want to have brush strokes, you always want to start with your paintbrush first, and then quickly before it dries, you're going to use your foam roller, and you're going to go over all those areas wherever you can reach with the foam roller. So that way you have a smooth finish and you won't see any of those like really harsh brush marks. Also, always remember to trust the process. I feel like during like mid-painting, everything is going to look awful. It really does. It looks horrible. You can see the paint color coming through. It's just, it doesn't look great, but just trust the process. Keep going. Don't give up. Keep on painting. Each coat you put on, it's going to look better and better each time. Remember that whenever you're painting the doors, you're going to treat them the same way that you did the sides. So always use your paintbrush first and then go over with the foam roller to kind of smooth off all those rough edges that you get when you're using a paintbrush. Once everything has a second coat, you're then going to go in with your final little touch-ups, getting all those little areas that you may have missed or that you may have hit as you were painting. So I'm just doing all my little finishing touches, and then I'm going to pull up all the paper and show you guys how just the paint looks so far, and then we're going to move on to working on the kitchen island top, which was the biggest transformation in my opinion. Thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Factor is a meal delivery service that makes meeting your nutritional goals easier than ever by delivering fresh, never frozen meals right to your doorstep. With summer being here, life has been busy, and making good quality meals for myself at home takes way too much time away from the things I would rather be doing. So when I discovered Factor, I thought it would be a great option for me, especially since I've been on my own fitness journey this year, and finding the time to cook has already been difficult, let alone trying to make a nutritious meal. Factor helps take away that stress of what to eat by providing dietitian-approved, fresh, never frozen meals that are ready in just 2 minutes. Yes, you heard that right, 2 minutes, and you have a delicious meal right in front of you. This saves you from all the planning, the grocery shopping, and the prep that goes into making a meal. And today I'm actually going to be making the jalapeno lime cheddar chicken with spicy cilantro cauliflower. Highly recommend getting this one if you decide to try Factor today. It's so good. I ate every single drop. I literally could not get enough of this. And what's great is right here on the back, you can just follow the heating instructions and you pop it right in the microwave. And like I said earlier, in just about 2 minutes, you have a meal in front of you that looks like it took you hours to cook. And it also tastes amazing. This meal was 10 out of 10 in my opinion. Also, to top it off, my husband has been taking these to work as well, and he just came home and confirmed that his meal was super delicious as well. I know a lot of you are probably wondering how much this Factor cost. So there are 6 different plan sizes to choose from. There's 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, or 18 delicious meals that you can have delivered to your door each week. And the meals start at around $11 per serving. So you can get on there, modify what works for your budget. But keep in mind that these meals are nutritious, they're great quality, they're going to be better for you than grabbing a meal from fast food. And if you're looking to save money on eating out, this is a great option for that because you're not going to be as tempted to stop in and grab food when you have something like this sitting in your fridge that is so much better for you, a lot more tasty and affordable too. I also wanted to mention another thing that I really love about meal delivery services like Factor in particular is you're not going to get stuck eating the same thing over and over and over again. You're definitely going to get to try new things and really get your taste buds working, and I love that. I love trying new food, but I am just not creative in the kitchen. So being able to come on here, choose from all these delicious looking meals is such a convenience, and it's also fun too because you get to just try new things that you would probably never try. So I thought that was pretty cool. Plus, you're not just limited to just meals here on Factor. There's so many different add-ons that you can enjoy as well for the week. So don't forget to head over to factor75.com or click the link down below and use code KarrieLynn50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. That's factor75.com. Use code KarrieLynn50 for 50% off your first Factor box. Wow, you guys, this is super good. All right, now that the painting is done and the kitchen island has been refinished, it's now time to work on the kitchen island top, which needed the most work in my opinion. This was a DIY butcher's block and I originally didn't seal it well enough, so as you can see there were scratches and nicks and it just looked like it was always so dirty. And I just do not like having dark countertops. I thought I would, but it just didn't work out. As much as we use the kitchen island, it just, like I said, it always looked dirty and dingy. So I took this DAP stucco patch and I'm actually going to use this as a replacement for concrete. So I love the look of concrete countertops or like a really authentic stone countertop, but I didn't like the price tag or the process of having to mix concrete and pour the concrete and use concrete molds. So I was trying to find something that would work as a replacement. And since I did my fireplace makeover and I used the stucco patch on the fireplace and I love the finish of it, I decided to take a chance and use this on the kitchen island top and hope that it worked out. And to my surprise, it actually worked out very well. The all-purpose stucco patch that I'm using here, these little containers, they're 32 ounce, I was able to get for $10.98 at Lowe's, and I ended up using 3 total. I purchased 4, but I only ended up needing 3, so that was really good. So really not too bad for this type of project. And now that the project is done and we have everything sealed with epoxy, I wanted to go ahead and let you know this was excellent. It actually worked very, very well and I've had no issues. I know some people said that I probably should have primed the kitchen island top before I did this with a moisture barrier. I didn't, and like I said, so far so good, but that might be an option for you, so definitely look into that. Here's how it was looking so far, and like I said, it definitely took a lot more than just one. I thought I was going to get away with using 1 container. So I ended up going to the store. I got more. I got gloves as well because I didn't want to get it all over my hands. I also grabbed a sponge, the type of sponge you would like kind of wash your car with. And I'm going to finish up adding all of the stucco to the countertop and then I'll show you guys the next step. Once everything has been coated, I did take this knockdown knife and I thought this was going to work a lot better, but it did not. So I don't even recommend buying this, but I took this and I tried to smooth out the edges, but really all this did was kept lifting the product. So sorry, I'm getting like super congested. I have a cold right now. So if you hear my voice change and go up and down, it's, I can't help it. But anyway, I tried to smooth it out and it really wasn't working. So then I took that sponge, like I told you guys, and I dampened it with water. And I'm going to use that instead to kind of sponge everything smooth and kind of wet sand. But I did want to mention, before you start doing this, you're definitely going to want it to dry a little bit. So I actually had some fans going to help speed up the drying process. You're going to want it to dry just a hair, not super dry because then it won't move, obviously. But just enough to where it's not wet enough where you're going to pull the product up, but wet enough where you can still smooth it. It's hard to really explain. I would say probably about like 40% dry. And then once you start working, if you see any imperfections at this point, it's now time to start getting those out. If there you find like any chunks of like little rock or dog hair or your hair or just something, get it out now before it's dry, because once it's dry, it's hard as a rock. The reason I'm pressing it like this is to kind of get rid of some of those harsh lines from trying to smooth it out. So once again, I'm just taking that sponge that's a little damp and I'm just kind of like tapping it onto the countertop to get rid of all those harsh lines. That way it had more of an authentic look and it didn't look like I just DIY'd this. At this point, I have got the entire countertop covered with the stucco. I've smoothed it out as best as I could. It's now time to let it just fully dry, but this is how it was looking at that moment. There were a few areas I had to go in and touch up once it was fully dry, so I just took some of that same stucco and just patched up some areas that were kind of showing through that I didn't see. And I do feel like when you're working on projects like this, the more you stare at it, the more you miss. So if you take a break and just walk away for a little bit and then come back, you can really just kind of get fresh set of eyes on it. For my final smoothing moment, I waited till the countertops were about 90% dry, and that took about 2 to 3 hours. And I'm once again taking that sponge and just spraying the countertop with water to just dampen it a little bit and kind of like wet sanding it, but using a sponge instead of sandpaper. And this gave me a super rounded, smooth edge while still leaving a lot of texture, so it still had that live edge look. A couple of days later, after letting it fully dry, I went in with the color Fawn Brindle. I believe this is a Sherwin Williams color. I'm not 100% though, so I'll just leave it in the description box. I'll look it up. But I actually purchased this as a sample to paint my dining room, and I didn't end up liking the color in there, but it worked out perfect for the countertop color. Once the countertops have been painted and fully dry, it's now time to get started on the epoxy. So I did have my husband help me out with this project just because I was a little nervous to tackle this on my own. So we worked together to tape off and put plastic around the kitchen island so I didn't ruin my new kitchen island that I just refinished. And then we're going to mix up the epoxy. I will have this brand linked down below. I do recommend it. However, I'm going to share with you some mistakes that we made along the way. So hopefully you don't make the same mistake and it'll help you get a better finish than what we got. All right, so when you're working with epoxy, every brand is different, so you're going to want to make sure that you follow the instructions for your particular epoxy to a T. Do not skip any steps because every step is very essential for the final product. So what we did was we mixed our equal parts because that's how this epoxy is, and you stir for a certain amount of time. You then use your heat gun to pop any bubbles before you pour. Now, whenever we went in originally, for some reason I missed this part on the epoxy, but the epoxy that we used was self-leveling. So when we originally poured it, I started to panic because it was like kind of thick and it was hard to really maneuver across the countertop with the roller. I noticed that my roller was getting like stuck and it wasn't rolling anymore, and I was kind of pushing so much product around, so it kind of made me panic. But don't worry because it does self-level itself out if you do use this particular one. Now, one thing that you could totally see here was that the color of the island countertop changed tremendously once we added the epoxy. That's because it's a very glossy finish, so the light is going to reflect off of it, and it changed the color, and I didn't like it. So I'm going to share with you what we did to fix that. But before I share that, I did want to share with you a little bit of the steps when it comes to working with epoxy. So as it's drying and any air bubbles that pop up, you're definitely going to want to use a heat gun or a torch to, pop all those bubbles as it's drying. Honestly, this project was a lot more tedious than I anticipated. I think it's just because, we have 3 dogs, kids, and my hair flying everywhere. It was really hard to keep the countertop clean. I did share this in previous videos as well. So just keep that in mind when you're working with epoxy. You're going to want to have no one home, and make sure that you don't live in an area where you have flies. We have flies terrible here in the South, and so many flies got in my epoxy. But yeah, you're just going to want to use the heat gun, pop all those bubbles, keep an eye on it, make sure nothing lands in your epoxy as it's drying, and hope for the best. This was what it looked like after the first coat of epoxy. As you could see, it definitely had that pink beige look to it, and I hated it. At this point, I was like, oh no, we messed up. It didn't look good with the wall color or the kitchen. I don't know. It just didn't look right. So that is when I ordered the epoxy pigment. So I ordered this pigment online. I'll put a screenshot right here on the screen of what it looks like. And I just 2 days shipped it from Amazon, so that way I could quickly get this countertop fixed. And then the second coat of epoxy that we mixed, we just added that pigment to the epoxy in hopes that when we added that second coat, it would really tone down a lot of those warm tones and make it back to the color that I originally liked. Now, when it came to mixing that pigment into the epoxy, I did want to go ahead and let you guys know that we already stirred all the epoxy together before we added the pigment. So we didn't add the pigment to the epoxy bowl until it was already stirred together. That way, whenever we poured in the pigment, we could kind of get a visual for what the color was going to look like. And as Dylan's pouring it here onto the counter, you can see it has like a white haze to it, but it's not like pure white. So we didn't want it to be a white countertop. We just wanted that little bit of white haze that was kind of see-through, something that was just going to tone down that warm color a little bit. And thankfully, it ended up turning out perfect. I don't know if we just got lucky or if this pigment is just that great, but yeah, this is the second coat going on. We're just rolling it on. At this point, we did realize, okay, this color or this epoxy is definitely self-leveling, so we weren't too worried about getting it perfect as we rolled it on. It was just a matter of spreading it all out as evenly as possible and then just letting the epoxy do its job. Here's how the epoxy looked with the second coat. Everything was looking really good, but there was a few dips and like big bubbles that happened, and it was totally my mistake, but I kind of dug into it in a few areas, and I also put the heat gun too close to a few areas, so it kind of burned the countertop. But this was just with the second coat, so we knew we still had one more coat to do before we got our final look. So at this point, it was totally okay to have any imperfections. Now is the time to start fixing those. So I actually filled this hole with a little bit more of the stucco that I used because it was actually like a hole in the countertop. Then I painted it using that fawn brindle color, and then we ended up doing our final coat of epoxy, which ended up hiding it really well. Also, on the edges of our countertop, you can see these little bubbles or drips. Those are all hardened, and they will all have to be scraped off in the very end. For the final coat of epoxy, we decided to go in with a little bit more of that white pigment, only because there was a few areas that I had to patch using that fawn brindle color, and I wanted them to be disguised as much as possible. So this was our final mixing right here, and then I am going to go ahead and add in that pigment to give a white haze to the epoxy. So we ended up making one of the biggest mistakes when working with epoxy, and we happened to work on it during a rainy day. So during the day, it was not humid at all outside. I live in Florida, by the way, and it's super humid here all the time, but on this particular day, it was not humid, and everything was drying wonderful. The epoxy countertops look great, as you can see from this video clip. Well, it wasn't until that afternoon that things took a turn. It started pouring outside, and we were going in and out of the backyard. I had laundry going, so even though it was like raining, I was kind of going in and out of the house. Well, our dry house turned very humid, and the final finish was not crystal clear like this. It ended up getting a kind of like white bubble, not bubbles, they're not bubbles. It's like little white specks all in the countertop for the final finish, and we ended up deciding to leave it as is. It's not the way we anticipated it looking. I really wanted that glass finish, but a lot of you commented on the video and said that I might actually like the textured look because it'll hide imperfections and scratches long term. So far, I think you guys are right. I actually don't mind the texture now that it happened. In the moment, I felt like it was a complete failed project, but that just kind of goes back to the whole like doing DIYs. Things don't always go as planned. Sometimes they're happy accidents, and like Bob Ross would say, I've been watching him a lot. Sometimes accidents are meant to happen, and they happen for a reason. But yeah, so our countertops have a little bit of texture to them, and like I said, I don't mind it. We ended up deciding to leave it as is. So a couple days later, after it was like really solid, fully dry, I think it was like a week later, I went in with a sharp knife and a hammer, and I was going to sand it down, but I didn't want to kick up a lot of dust in the house. So I just took the knife and the hammer and I just kind of popped off all the little drips that were hanging off the edge of the countertop. To finish off the kitchen island, I did replace all the hardware. I ordered this hardware off Amazon. I'll have it linked down below. It's really, really beautiful. It's a champagne bronze color, and I feel like they just look so good in this space. I can't wait to replace all the other hardware in the kitchen. But I got these all installed, and I'm gonna go ahead and share with you a quick before and after of the entire kitchen island, and I think it turned out so beautiful. Y'all let me know what you think. Hopefully I answered all of your questions. If I happen to miss anything, make sure you check the description box first. I will have a material list, and if it's not there, feel free to leave a comment and I will do my best to get back to every one of you. But thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate you so much, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, y'all.